I want us to start by examining some of your biases and some basic agreed upon sort of standards here. So gender and sexual variance is not the norm in society, but it is completely normal here. People can change. So someone can identify with something today, and that may change further down the line. Gender, sexuality are fluid. We have studies that show this. We have realities that show this. And change does not mean that someone was not true before, or that they were somehow lying before, or that their previous life before they come out in whatever form wasn't valid here. You might have some pretty strong opinions. I think if you're actually listening to this, despite the extra credit boon, you are at least a little bit open to learning some more here, but you don't get to define gender or sexuality for somebody else. And so what we talk about here today, it might not be for you, but it is for somebody else, and you don't get to make that decision for them. You might have questions here. This is an okay space to ask some of those questions, but asking random people on the street is not okay here. No one owes you an explanation of who they are. They say this is what they do. That's what you should follow there, and especially not strangers. And it's totally okay to be cis and straight. Most people are in society. So learning about diversity does not make that attack on who you are, but it doesn't mean that you can't be an ally there to those who aren't. So things about gender and language in particular. So gender nonconformity seems like perhaps it's been a new issue. A lot of people haven't been paying attention to it, but this is something that has existed for the entirety of human history. And so just because the language is new, just because it's become political enough that you see it on the news, doesn't mean that you're just creating this new issue or these new identities here. Changes in sexual orientation, gender identity, language can be especially disturbing to people who've grown up in Western or Christian cultures. Western Christian culture has a very narrow view of gender and of sexuality, about what is right and what is wrong there. Many other cultures around the world and many other cultures, indigenous cultures in the United States, are much more permissive of gender variance and sexual variance than sort of the traditional culture of the United States. Normativity is a concept that means that what is sort of the dominant idea in society? And so we'll talk about the ideas of cisgender and heterosexuality here, but these are both normative pieces. And so what you think is the real way of existing here is a normative piece, and that then translates into and reinforces sort of the dominant narrative here. Cisgender is the right thing to be, is a normative concept here, and one that I will wholeheartedly disagree with there. There's increasing but incremental acceptance, and like most things when it comes to diversity or pushing the boundaries here, there's always pushback of this sort of difference, but language itself is really, really important. It legitimizes people. It creates a right to exist in an area in which people can exist. It can give you language to talk about yourself or to talk about experiences that people in your lives are having there. And it creates a space for existence here. One thing that I will point out is that every language has to go through this sort of morphine and evolution. And so what I'm talking about today is very much how the English language takes on the issues of gender expansiveness and gender diversity. But other languages around the world then are going to have their own challenges. And so just one that you may run across most commonly in the United States, Latino, Latina, gendered Spanish pronouns here are being changed or being evolved into Latinx or Latine in order to encompass this gender diversity, to have non-gendered pronouns. And so if any of you learn other languages here, do a little deep dive. There may be some work there that is being done to change that. In many ways, English is easier than some languages to have a more gender neutral area because we don't gender most of our nouns here. And unlike French or Spanish, where almost everything is gendered, we have less work to do in some areas there. So if you're interested in that, I would highly recommend you check that out. But again, this is gonna come from the English side of things. So what are some ways that language has evolved when we talk about gender diversity and sexual orientation more broadly here? We drop old language. So there's some terms that we don't use anymore. So transvestite, transsexual is transgender. now, and transgender is an adjective. No one is ever transgendered. It's not something that happens to you. It is an adjective describing a place here. Intersex is now our common term here to talk about someone whose chromosomes don't align with traditional XX or XY standards there. The dictionary is always the standard then for who gets what words and what words are widely accepted. And so the dates here are some of the words that have been added in the last 5 or 10 years here to the English language as official terminology here. So cisgender, someone whose gender identity aligns with their sex assigned at birth, genderqueer, gender fluid. Mix here, MX is the alternative to Mr. or Ms. As a gender neutral honorific there. Asexual, they, we'll spend some time talking about gender neutral pronouns, but they as a singular pronoun has been used since Shakespeare. It's been used for a very long time. But it finally made the dictionary, the official Oxford English Dictionary in 2019 there. There's also what we see in addition to sort of dropping old terms or reimagining or using newer terms, comes with a process of reclaiming terms that have been used as slurs in the past. So the biggest one in the LGBTQ community lately is queer. You can actually get degrees now in queer studies, something that we wouldn't have imagined that being used as anything other than a slur 20 or 30 years ago. Still used as a slur today, don't get me wrong, but in many ways it's been reclaimed by the community, hence the Q at the end of LGBTQ. One other thing I will say about language in general here is most of the terms dealing with the LGBTQ community are going to be used as adjectives. They are not nouns. They describe a person. So you're not a transgender, you're a transgender person. Not a queer, but a queer person there. And so the vast majority of terminology is, again, an adjective used to describe someone. Why is this important? Why learn about new pronouns? Why learn about gender diversity in general? It's becoming more common. And so a recent study by the Trevor Project found that 1 in 4 LGBTQ youth use some combination of gender neutral pronouns here. And so this is getting to be a large chunk of the population. I use they, them pronouns. This is not something I figured out for myself that I was comfortable with until I was in my 30s. So it's becoming more common here. And so it's good to learn about it. So as we jump into talking about gender diversity and gender identity, sex and gender are different. This is an important concept here. The sex assigned at birth, male, female, or intersex. Intersex, again, is this huge category of someone who doesn't align specifically into those categories. And the acronyms then AMAB and AFAB, assigned male at birth and assigned female at birth, are often used as ways to describe someone, especially if their gender identity does not align with their sex assigned at birth. Hopefully everyone has heard of the term transgender at this point. Again, this is an adjective, so trans man or trans woman. Cisgender is the antithesis of this. Cisgender is someone whose sex aligns with their gender identity. Transgender is someone who doesn't. And in my mind, it's literally like your game piece starts on one thing and you move it off of the starting point here. If you're moving your gender off of the starting point, transgender can be a term that you use. Some other terms that are used for people whose, again, gender identity doesn't align with their sex assigned at birth, genderqueer and non-binary. I've got the flags over on the side here. The top one is transgender. The middle one there is the genderqueer flag, and the bottom one is non-binary. If you've ever gone to a Pride event, you know you have to like read the symbols and read the flags here. And so, yeah, genderqueer, non-binary, NB. There are another terms to talk about it. Some other ones. Someone can be gender fluid, meaning their gender actually sort of oscillates or it moves. Sometimes you're more femme, sometimes you're more masculine. We'll see these prefixes later, but agender 1, bigender 2, trigender 3, pangender, all the genders, different ways to identify. And demi as another prefix here, someone who only identifies loosely with usually their sex assigned at birth or with a gender identity here. So demi girl, demi man, and so on. binary versus non-binary then. So if non-binary is an identity, we got to know what binary means in the first place. And so transgenderness on the gender binary. So to be transgender means, again, you are transitioning from one gender to another. Binary here, we've got two options, female or male. And when you talk about someone who is transgender, you're talking about their endpoint, their true identity here. So someone who is assigned male at birth, but identifies as female is a trans woman. Someone who is assigned female at birth, but identifies as a man is a trans man. So this is binary. You're one or the other, and you go between those two pieces. Non-binary, genderqueer, gender fluid, these all say that this isn't just a one or the other choice. There is something in the middle, there's something between. Again, gender fluid may mean you sort of switch back and forth between the spectrum. There's other ways that we could graph this. You don't necessarily have to be between these two endpoints. Male and female may not be endpoints at all. So maybe I'm just using my terrible PowerPoint art here at this point, but maybe we just blow it up here, that there isn't sort of a binary within this area. So riffing on gender here, some terms that you can use and umbrella terms. I really like this graphic. This was done by Melanie Gilman in their sort of an autobiographical short comic called Non-Binary, but they actually talk about gender here as these sort of cosmoses, and male and female are things that you sort of circle around. Some people are closer to ideal male or ideal female, whatever society makes that. And some are just floating around in random spaces around those different concepts here. Yeah. I don't know why that's happening. All right, I'll assume if you raise your hand, that's what's going on there. So some umbrella terms: transgender, genderqueer, non-binary. These can all be umbrella terms. They can mean a lot of different things to whoever's using them. So again, transgender could be a binary concept, but it could be something, you could be transgender non-binary. I've moved my starting peg off of my sex assigned at birth, and now I am somewhere in the middle there. All of these mean someone is not cisgender. Another acronym, TGNB, trans and non-binary. People get to choose which ones they want of these identities. And so some people will be non-binary but not use transgender to describe themselves, and so on here. And it's up to the person to decide what that identity looks like to them. Another piece of language here, TwoSpirit. TwoSpirit is an indigenous identity. It's for Native peoples to the Americas in particular. So this is not something that if you are not Native, you should not call yourself TwoSpirit. This is a particular cultural and word used by Native cultures here. And what they say with this is that this is a term that was developed to deal with what they call the problem of naming. The idea that Western culture, Christian culture, had largely snuffed out or demonized the gender diversity that was celebrated amongst Native peoples for the entirety of Native history. Many tribes have their own specific terminology for 1, 2, 3, 4 genders, and so on. But this is an umbrella term, as I said, that was created to encompass these people within the indigenous community. So if you ever see the LGBTQ acronym with the number 2 or 2S on it, this is including TwoSpirit peoples. That acronym is much more common in Canada than it is in the United States, but if you see it, that's what it means here. Again, the individual tribal nations, of which there are hundreds of them across the Americas here, each have their own way of dealing with this, but in tribal and indigenous culture, gender diversity was revered. This was someone who had a unique understanding about what it meant to be human. You could understand both sides of the coin here and could act as a bridge in many ways between the cisgender people within your community and within the spirit community as a whole. Gender expression then. Gender expression is different than gender identity, or it may not align entirely here. Gender expression is about whether you present masculine or feminine. And so within this, we can have trans masc, trans femme folks. You can be masculine of center, feminine of center. This is again about how you present yourself to the world. And this is very much based then on the cultures in which you live. What is traditional and thus makes you non-conforming or non-traditional here will matter. We've got all kinds of words that can describe gender non-conforming peoples. All sorts of things can describe what we are conforming to. If you're non-conforming, what are you not conforming to? Appearance is a major one, but what jobs do you use? What language do you use? How do you walk down the street? What posture do you use? There are things that are expected of men and expected of women in society, and gender non-conforming people are outside of those boundaries. Most people who are gender non-conforming identify as cisgender. So they're gender non-conforming woman or gender non-conforming man. You can be non-binary or trans but many are cisgender. The idea of passing is an idea that says that you fake it. You conform to what society expects of you, usually in order to be safe within your communities. People who stand out, who deviate from the norm, are demonized, are ostracized, and are sometimes violently put back in their place. And again, the normativity, the expectation of what you should be leads people to, again, act in a way that makes them conform and fit in and not stand out there. So cis passing, doing this on the basis of gender identity, straight passing, doing it on the basis of sexual orientation. Again, standing out can be dangerous, and so many will or can try to pass. Performing gender variance then. Cross-dressing is not a term that we use all that frequently anymore. Historically, particularly women would cross-dress for practical reasons. If you needed a job and needed to earn money, you would dress as a man in order to do this. Cross-dressing today is largely simply gender expression. So if a woman is wearing pants, they're not cross-dressing, they're just wearing pants. And so again, we don't use that term the same way that we have historically. However, in performance, in entertainment, drag queens very much embrace this cross-dressing as entertainment. And there's actually been some really great articles about drag as activism now, and this very overt show of gender nonconformity as a way to push conversations forward here and bring attention to issues. So gender identity in the world, transitioning. So transitioning is this idea of changing physical appearance, changing social appearance. A couple things about transitioning before we talk about some specifics. There is no single way to transition gender-wise. And there's not all people can transition, not all people want to physically transition here. And so your gender identity and being transgender does not depend on transitioning in and of itself. So people who don't transition are not any less trans than people who do. And people who do transition or do have gender affirming surgery or so on may not identify as trans at all. And so again, this depends on the person. Why transition or why not? What are some of the things that hold people back particularly? A big part of it is access to care. It costs money to do this. Many insurance companies don't cover gender-related medical care. And in West Virginia, PEIA, which is the major public insurance agency, doesn't. It explicitly says we will not cover these things. There are lawsuits going through now to push that and to make access happen. But again, it can be extremely costly. It can also be a safety concern. Again, this is a more permanent, more obvious show of gender nonconformity, and that may not be safe for many people. Why transition? Trans people talk about the idea of gender dysphoria, your body not feeling like it fits you, your gender identity not matching the body that you have. And so transition helps people to achieve body euphoria, gender euphoria. This works. You look in the mirror and go, that is what I'm supposed to look like there. There's a couple of different ways that you can transition. So for the most part, this gets boiled down in media or public entities into medical transition and surgery. And that is only part of what transitioning can mean here. For many, socially transitioning is enough. And for young people who are not of an age of consent where medical transition is possible, social transition is all you have here. So to socially transition means to live in your true gender identity. So you might change your name, you might change your pronouns, you change your clothing or your appearance here. If someone does change their name and asks you to call them by a different name, do so. Never dead name. A dead name is the name that is being left behind here by someone who has transitioned. It's beyond rude and can be extremely harmful for someone there. So if someone is socially transitioning, support them in that. Again, physical medical transition can also happen. There are some non-surgical options that you can do to change your body, to change your presentation overall. Hormones, puberty blockers for younger people going through puberty. We actually use puberty blockers for cisgender kids too. This is not a novel technology here. And gender confirming surgery are all options there. So transgender and transitioning, again, not everyone who's transgender will transition. Not everyone who's transgender will transition medically for any variety of reasons, up to and including simply personal choice. But they are options that are out there. I think from the perspective of the audience here, what's the biggest thing that you guys need to take out? What's on you about learning here? It might be pronouns, to be entirely honest here, because this is actually what you're going to use when you're interacting with the world. Pronouns are how we talk about people when they're not in the room, or how you refer to them indirectly. If you're not sure on pronouns, you can just always use someone's name. And there are people who say, please don't use pronouns for me. Just always use my name. And you can do that. Just a minor thing here. If you're asking for someone's pronouns, don't say which pronouns do you prefer. Ask them which pronouns they use. There's such a thing as microaggressions, little nitpickings that can tear people down here. And this isn't a preference. This is something that I am and I do. One thing I will note on pronouns, especially if you're working with young people, they may have different pronouns that they use in different situations. They may not be out to their parents. They may not feel safe being out there. And make sure that you are aware and that you allow them to put in place those caveats. So yeah, when I'm in school, please use they, them. But if you're talking to my parents, please use he, him, because they don't know. And so just be aware that that might be something where in some situations, you may feel more comfortable using ones than others. Uh-oh, I'm spinning. So binary pronouns, again, ones that are traditionally associated with male or female here. These are the ones that you guys will be most familiar with. However, there's a whole host now of non-binary, gender neutral, and what are known as new pronouns. So the most common one is they, them, their. This is sort of the non-binary pronoun, but it doesn't have to be. Historically, actually, the ones a couple further down the line here, em and z, them were probably the most common. Z here, another set of common ones. One of the newest neo-pronouns that's starting to take off is fey. People can decide, how do I want people to talk to me? I've seen Prince used, there's all kinds of now neo-pronouns that are out there. So ask, and if you are told what someone's pronouns are, be sure that you're using them there. Some questions or comments that I get or that I've heard that have come across with regards to pronouns. A big one is, how do you know? How do you know what someone's pronouns are? I push, and it's hard to make this happen, but don't assume a binary pronoun. You can't tell people's pronouns by how they look. You may guess fairly correctly, but you may not be correct there. So observe if someone uses them in email signatures, if someone uses them, if they're wearing out a pin on their backpack, use those pronouns as you find them there. Ask politely, but you can ask what someone's pronouns are. I'm a big fan of the introducing yourself and using your pronouns, because that creates then an opening space for someone to respond to you with their pronouns. But again, use them if you're told. What do you do if someone has multiple pronouns? So I see this in Twitter feeds and stuff all the time. So they'll have like he, they, or she, he, they, or some will say use any pronouns. What should you do there? Do what they ask. Use any of them. So what I would caution here is it's not meant to make you more comfortable. So if you've known someone as he all their life, don't just always use he. Use both. They put them both out there because that's how they want to be understood. So if they have multiple pronouns, use multiple pronouns when talking about them. What if you get it wrong? That's fine. It happens. Apologize briefly. If someone says, I'm sorry, I used they, them. Sorry, thanks for telling me, and go on with your life. It's not a big moment. It's not a catastrophic thing. Just recognize that you made the mistake there and continue on. One thing that I would say is that it does take some time to retrain yourself. It becomes reflexive for us to use particularly binary pronouns for people. So you may need to practice on your own. And a tactic that I had seen and that I really like is the 3-sentence exercise. So if you get someone's pronouns wrong, when you have time, not like while you're standing in front of them, but when you have time, say 3 sentences in your head or out loud that use the correct pronouns for that person. And again, it will just reiterate and retrain yourself to use and associate different pronouns with them going forward. Why, if you're cisgender, do you need to display your pronouns if they're obvious? I'm a woman, I look like a woman, my voice sounds like a woman. Why do I need to say she, her? Yeah, the argument here is that it will clarify for others. Again, if we're not assuming binary pronouns, you can tell others what this is. It makes your respect for other people's pronouns very clear, that if someone does have a different set of pronouns, that those will be available there, and that you're creating a space that says, I'm aware of what this means. I know how this works. And yeah, if you're using pronouns that are not sort of the norm there, you can tell me and I'll be aware of and use those for you. So I highly recommend email signatures and those types of things. Put them in there. Again, even if you do use he, him, her, she, her, hers, put them on there because again, it creates a space where it says we recognize that pronouns are a thing here. The final one, most people won't say this out loud, though some do. They'll say, that's just, I can't do it. I can't use singular they, even though we use it all the time. It just doesn't work for me. And my response to that is not very understanding. Quit being selfish. Don't prioritize yourself here. It's not about you. This is about the person that you're interacting with there. You don't get to decide what is and what is not okay or right there. And intentionally misgendering somebody, refusing to use the pronouns that they want is wildly disrespectful and harmful. It is demoralizing and depressing to be constantly misgendered, and to have someone that knows better continue to do that is again, it's not okay. There. Just a brief note on sexual orientation here. So this has been about the language of gender identity. With regards to sexual orientation, this actually has nothing to do in many ways with gender identity. You can be cisgender or transgender and have any different sexual orientation here. Why do you need to talk briefly about sexual orientation is because we define sexual orientation by the gender of yourself and the gender of the person that you're in a relationship with. And so that's where gender comes in with regards to sexual orientation. Gender expression does not equal sexuality. Effeminate men can be straight, butch women can be straight. So gender expression in and of itself should not be a cue for you or isn't a guaranteed cue about someone's sexual orientation. Just a brief note, you can have romantic versus sexual attraction. So who do you want to sleep with versus who do you actually want to like hang out with and date? Here, different types of attraction. And again, the terminology that we use for those has the same suffix, or different suffixes, but the same prefix here. So homosexual and heterosexual, again, someone who's attracted to their own gender or someone who's attracted to a different gender, or really considered to be the opposite in a binary sense here. Especially with the emergence of gender diversity, Bisexual, a broader understanding of bisexual, pan, omni, those are much more common now. People are starting to use those more frequently. And again, you can have the same sort of combinations here when it comes to romantic attraction as well. So some best practices here. Don't assume gender and use gender neutral language until you know differently there. And once you know, use what you're told there. So again, this does mean maybe soliciting pronouns here. In groups, always assume gender diversity. This is one that's really hard for many people to get past. We're used to starting meetings with ladies and gentlemen, that kind of thing. But I would nearly guarantee that if you're in a group of more than 20 people at this point, you'll probably have someone who is non-conforming gender diverse. That's just not accurate terminology then. And I come from a place, I'm from South Dakota originally, where y'all wasn't actually a term that was used very often. And I moved to West Virginia and I am in love. No matter where I go in life, y'all is fantastic. It is a perfect gender neutral term to start everything here. And so y'all works great. Again, create space for authentic gender expression. So again, provide your pronouns regularly and habitually. For those who are professors, I don't know if we have many, they actually have a professor meeting next door today. But in your syllabi on Zoom, you can go into your Zoom profile and put your pronouns on Zoom, and you can have it ask you if you want to show them on Zoom. So that can show up again in your email signature, on door signs. It just creates that understanding and that space for authentic gender expression to happen around you. Again, ask for pronouns and chosen names. I would recommend not doing this in full groups, but again, provide space for this. So I know especially for a faculty member, the names we get are the list of names that come off of whatever your registration is. So I always try to make sure that when I'm doing rosters at the beginning of class, say, if you go by something else, let me know. Plenty of people use nicknames or other names. And again, it creates that space for, again, this authenticness to happen. If you're creating forms that need gender, and I put a star by need, because really ask yourself if you actually need to know gender on this form anyways, but always offer some sort of alternative to binary. So even if it's just an other, kind of odd, but other at least allows someone to not have to force themselves into a box that isn't theirs there. So make sure that that's available. Again, having a couple of options, if you've got a drop-down menu, give non-binary and so on there as options that are available. And again, if you are doing groups, if any of you are doing clubs or things where you separate boys and girls or men and women, again, think about one, why are you separating that way? And then also think about at least what are you going to do with people who don't fit into that category? And so even if something as simple as boys on this side, girls on this side, and if you're non-binary, take your pick. But acknowledge the fact that there may be some that don't fit within that, and again, create an option for them to find their place there. So some final conclusions here. Again, sex and gender can be different. People get to decide where they align on any of these, and it can change over time. Some people have a gender identity that moves beyond the binary. And knowing the language can help you navigate this. It can help it be less startling when you run across it. It can help make you a better teacher, a better leader, a better anything there, a better friend, just by being able to give yourself the tools to understand how this language works there. So that's what I've got. I'll come back to this in just a second because I do want to allow you to ask some questions if you want to here. I just want to say that on these slides, I do have a couple of different things afterwards. And if you would like a copy of the slides, email me and I can send them to you. But information that I got for this presentation, I've got sort of a recommendation list. I've also got a list of LGBTQ books. So there's lots of good books that are out there that deal with this. And so I've got Melanie Gilman's Non-Binary up there. A Quick and Easy Guide to They Them Pronouns is fantastic. It's a graphic novel by a non-binary artist. So lots of good things. There's some really fantastic reading lists out there. Literature itself has gotten a lot more diverse over the last decade or so. And so there are a lot of books out there with trans protagonists, non-binary protagonists, and so on. And there's some good places for you to find it. And I also then have on here some organizations that if you're interested in engaging with the LGBTQ community more broadly, I've got some local groups, some nationwide ones. We do have a Beckley, specific Beckley Pride organization that's active, Fairness West Virginia, and West Virginia as a whole. They actually released their own transgender health guide with doctors who are familiar with transgender needs and transgender people and can help out there. Again, Campaign for Southern Equality also has a really good resource there. So I'm not at all sure what time it is or if this classroom is going to be used later. Oh, I nailed it. I was shooting for 45. I just threw a ton of information at you. Do you guys have any questions, things that you want me to clarify? Those of you that are online, you can throw something in the chat. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Create forms that allow them to say what was your sex assigned at birth and what is your actual gender identity, and ask for pronouns, because that makes then the interaction so much clearer. It's a clear instance where you need to know sex assigned at birth, but that's not maybe how you should interact with them. And so make it really easy on forms that just say, yeah, this is how I want you to address me here. Because yeah, your insurance card is going to have some official information that may not be how you want to be. So yeah, from the get-go, that would absolutely be what I'd recommend. Okay, so this is a great question. It has to do with neurodivergent and neuroatypical people. My thoughts in general. There's been some research that says that neurodivergent, neuroatypical people may be more likely to be gender nonconforming. I think in many ways you're outside of the norm anyways, and so it makes it easier to do this. I think that if you're neurodivergent, we should absolutely have the same rights to decide these things. I think a lot of times people who are neurodivergent may run into problems with people believing them. And I think that that's wildly appalling, that you should be able, again, to define for yourself what that looks like and how you want to interact with the world. So I hope that answers your question. Anything else? Okay, well, again, thank you all for coming out. If you did have questions that you didn't want to ask in front of everybody, or if you want, again, a copy of the slides or anything else, just let me know. My email is up there, andrea.kent@mail.wvu.edu. I'm more than happy to talk to you. My office is here on campus, and you can find that if you want to come talk to me face to face, or you have any follow-ups. Okay, one more question came in real quick. Learn a way to talk to my kids about your info. There's actually some really fantastic little kids books. I think my favorite interaction I've ever had with regards to gender has been with a 4-year-old. We were hanging out and she was with my parents and she said, "Oh, I thought you were a boy. And I guess you're a girl." I said, "No, I'm a little bit of both." She's like, "Oh, okay, I'm a girl." And that was it. And I was like, this is brilliant. Everyone should interact with little kids this way because they just get it. Let me see if I have it on here. It Feels Good to Be Yourself is a fantastic book here. If for again, younger people, you were born a boy, you feel like a girl, you're transgender. It just is super simple, super easy, beautifully illustrated there. For people who are middle school, high school age, I would just ask them, is this something you're running into at school? Do you have any friends that are using different pronouns? How do you feel about this? Feel free to give them the link to this this presentation and ask them how they feel about it. Again, just create space, create an openness that says, yeah, I'd be willing to talk to you about this. I won't be surprised. I won't be put off if this is something that is going on in your life. And again, I think a lot can be done with just saying, yeah, this is something that's going on in the world. How is it impacting you there? Also, a couple of those other fiction books that I have up there right now. Deep Dark Blue it's got a trans girl protagonist and is probably for middle school students. Witch Boy is also a gender nonconforming boy for middle school. Mooncakes is probably for high school age. And it has a non-binary protagonist in it. So I'm a big graphic novel fan. And they, again, are doing some really great stuff with gender diversity there. So if you want to talk books, send me an email. I'm more than happy to send you my list. All right, how do you think as a society we can better conform to non-gender conforming people? Again, I think it's just creating space, recognizing that there are gender non-conforming people that are out there, making it more available, watching your language there. Can get familiar with and get comfortable with introducing yourself and your pronouns in order to make sure that that is clear going forward. I finally went to a professional conference where we had pronoun buttons available. And so just introducing that language and the recognition that things are out there. And I would say really just trusting people to know who they are. And it's, again, not your job to question what that is ultimately. And so be respectful, create space there, and go on with your life, because you've been living with gender nonconforming people for your whole life, I promise you. And so it's just finding that space for them to be willing and able to be open. And that's really what we've got. All right. That will probably be done. I know some of you have a 2 o'clock class, so I'll get you out of here with enough time. But again, if you've got other questions, again, want to talk reading lists and graphic novels or something, shoot me an email. And I'm more than happy to talk to you about that. But again, thanks for coming out. Thanks to Scott Robertson and the diversity programs for letting me do this talk. Again, it's a topic I really feel passionate about. So thanks again. Take care, everybody.